Now, who is the host today?
Sir, this is Balaji, first year medicine PG.
Okay, good evening, Balaji. How are you?
Doing good, sir.
Fine. Okay. Dr. Balaji, you can also put your inputs in between.
Sure, sir. There is nothing to add. You completely covered everything comprehensively.
Not the your entrance-oriented things or the things, simple things. I think it is a repetition class. Hello.
Hello, yes, sir.
There is some echo.
No, sir. There's no echo.
Okay, maybe.
Yes.
Prajna, I believe this is your second case.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. When did you take this case?
On 1 month back, sir.
Yeah, that was a lockdown period. How did you go to the hospital? That's what I was wondering about.
So it was not in our college, so it's
okay. Fine.
Sir, my dad is a physician. I took case in our own hospital.
Good. Now, next time when you take the case, you need to take some photographs of the patient as well.
Okay, sir.
So that we know what are the findings. Okay. To everyone, those who are presenting, it is always better to put the photographs of the findings, positive findings.
Sir, I think we can start. I'll just we'll be we are doing this live on YouTube also.
Okay.
Professor, can we start, sir?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone.
Today, I'll just start with. As you know, Sir, Professor Bhatt is the head of the Department of Medicine at KVG Medical College, Surlia. He is known for the diagnosis based on only history with less investigations. And it has been a great journey for us. And Sir has been kind enough to always help us in all the discussions anytime. So thank you, sir, for your presence today. And over to you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks for this. And today, Ms. Prajna is presenting the second case of the series. There is some problem with the audio?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, so we'll, Prajna, you can go ahead. I think we'll start the case right away. Yeah, you can start presenting.
Here is a 44-year-old gentleman, Mr. XYZ, who has studied up to PUC. He is a librarian. He hails from Somnalli, Kadur Taluk. He belongs to upper middle socioeconomic status according to modified BG Prasad classification. He was admitted on 7th of April 2020 and was examined on 8th of April.
Okay, now that why are you very specifically hiding the name of the patient?
Because this is public platform and it's
Okay, fine. Okay.
The patient came with chief complaints of distension of abdomen since 6 months, fatigue since 4 months, swelling of both legs since 15 days, breathlessness since 15 days, yellowish discoloration of eye and dark colored urine since 1 week.
Okay, just by this chief complaint, can you highlight something on this? Possible system involved, at least.
Sir?
Because chief complaint is the one which tells us, leads us the torch to go forward, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So based on these chief complaints, can you tell us what is the system involved? It's very simple, basic, very basics.
Sir, liver, GIT system.
Okay, either hepatobiliary or gastrointestinal system, at least that.
Hepatobiliary.
Okay, fine, fine, fine. Yes.
History of presenting illness. The patient was apparently normal 6 months ago. Then he noticed distension of abdomen, which was insidious in onset and gradually progressive. He had consulted a doctor at Hassan 5 months ago, where he was admitted for a week. He improved symptomatically and is on regular medication since then, details of which are not known. However, after 1 month of treatment, he started deteriorating in the form of gradual distension of abdomen. Fatigue since 4 months, which is gradually worsening, and for the last 3 months, he is not attending his duties. Swelling of both legs below the knee since 15 days. It started at the ankle and gradually progressed up to knee. It's more in the evening hours. It's not associated with pain.
Okay. Now you are talking about abdominal distension, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Of 6 months duration. What
Yes,
are the
sir.
common causes of the abdominal distension, gradually progressive abdominal distension?
It can be because of ascites or because it may be because of constipation, fetus. Sorry, and in females it's fetus.
Okay.
And for short duration means flatus for short duration, not 6 months history.
Okay.
And any fatal growth.
Okay, that means tumor.
Tumor.
Okay, cyst or tumor. Okay, at least something which can, now even in the first paragraph itself, you can include all those histories to suggest that it is not a tumor, it is not a constipation, it is not a chronic constipation, it is not a tumor or something like that.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, so if it is ascites, what are the possibilities?
It can be because of cirrhosis of liver, which leads with portal hypertension.
Cirrhotic ascites, one thing.
And congestive cardiac failure.
Congestive cardiac failure.
Nephrotic syndrome, tuberculous abdomen, malignancy.
So there are so many conditions, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So in the same sentence, in the same the abdominal distension, you can explain most of the things. Instead of telling at the end, you have done that, saying that, no, this. Okay?
Okay, sir.
With the fatigue is a significant symptom, associated symptom or a significant symptom?
Associated symptoms, sir.
Okay. So again, that can be going with his illness is associated with the progressive fatigability. Okay. Why swelling of leg has started only for the 15 days, that is after almost 5 months after or he had on and off swelling?
It started since 15 days. So before he had no swelling of legs. It may be because of hypoproteinemia.
Why did you ask about pain in the swelling legs?
If it was some cellulitis.
Will it be bilateral? You said both legs.
It's not. It won't be bilateral.
So
usually it won't be bilateral.
Fine. Anything can produce painful swelling on the bilaterally?
I don't know, sir.
Okay. especially when the patient, they go to that, in a female patient, they typically present with bilateral DVTs. Usually unilateral, but they can manifest with bilateral DVT as well. When they develop a tumor in the carcinoma cervix. Carcinoma cervix infiltrate the adjoining this thing, pelvic urine gets obstructed. They develop painful swelling of the both legs. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
He complains of breathlessness without wee since 15 days. Initially, he was breathless while walking uphill. At present, he is breathless while walking about 100 meters. There is no history suggestive of orthopnea, PND, tripopnea, or platypnea. He complains of yellowish discoloration of eye and dark yellowish urine since 1 week. There is decreased frequency of urination since 1 week, which is 2 to 3 times per day. However, there is no history of generalized itching or pale stools. He gives history of marked thinning of extremities in 6 months.
Okay, now decreased frequency. Is it frequency is important or quantity is important?
Quantity, sir.
So what does it suggest? Suppose, now what is normal frequency of micturition per day? You have written per day.
In this case, compared to his previous,
A normal person, healthy individual.
4 to 6 times per day.
4 to 6 times per day. How many times in a day and night? Frequency, nocturnal frequency. And what has happened in this patient?
Nocturne night, a normal person, they won't get up from sleep for urination.
Okay. Now what has happened in this patient?
In this patient, there's decreased quantity also, sir.
Quantity. So you need to mention about decreased quantity. That is more important than the just frequency. Okay.
Okay. Sir.
Quantity is important. What is the significance of quantity of urination?
So there's oliguria. There's because of ascites, there will be sodium and water retention and.
Why it should produce decreased urine output? Decreased frequency and decreased urine output. Now, any person, for that matter, not in this patient, in fact, because there is a gap of 5 months from the development of the abdominal distension to the decreased urine output. Somebody says that from 2 days I'm having decreased urine output, and 3rd day, 4th day, or 1 week I started developing abdominal distension, leg swelling. That becomes a, what is that? Very simple. I'm not talking about complicated things.
Hepatorenal.
Abdominal distension with the decreased urine output from the day 1 itself or first week itself.
Hepatorenal.
That may take out. No, we don't talk about hepato now. We are not talking about liver. Any patient coming with abdominal distension and decreased urine output, which is associated, close together.
Renal failure.
Renal failure, either renal failure or glomerulonephritis or nephrotic syndrome. Do you think that nephrotic syndrome will have decreased urine output?
Yes, sir.
Nephrotic syndrome, will it have decreased urine output or not?
Yes, sir, it will have.
No.
There will be.
Nephrotic syndrome will not have oliguria. Only nephritic syndrome and acute renal failure will have the oliguria. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Now, what do you mean by oliguria now? Because you have put up that decreased frequency and you said decreased quantity also. I'm just highlighting. What do you mean by oliguria?
Decreased urination, less than 400 ml.
Yeah, why do you want to put that 400 ml cutoff value? 400 to 500, 450, 500 ml. Okay, whatever it is. Less than 400 ml is called as oliguria. Why do you want to say that 400 ml is cutoff? Why not 600 ml is oliguria? What is the normal urine output per day?
1,000 to 1.5 liters.
Yeah, 1.5 to 1.2 to 1.5 liters is normal urine output. So why do you call it as 400 is the oliguria?
Decreased glomerular filtration.
Fine, all those things are fine. Many mechanism reduce urine output less than 400 ml is called as oliguria. Less than 50 ml is called as anuria. No term is absolute anuria. Doesn't matter. But why that 400 ml is called as cutoff value of oliguria?
Don't know, sir.
Okay. Now, the very purpose of the production of the urine and excretion of the urine is excretion of the metabolic waste products. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Now, even in a normal healthy person, day-to-day metabolism, cellular metabolism will produce what? Solutes, nitrogenous waste products. Okay. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, these nitrogenous waste products, the solute which is produced, has to dissolve in the water and go out of as a urine, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So the amount of the quantity of waste products which is produced per day to dissolve and completely excreted, it requires minimum 400 ml of water. You know the solution, the sugar solution you make reaching the concentration point, solute in solution. Yes.
Yes, sir.
So similarly, so if the urine output is less than 400 ml, that makes the water excretion very minimal, which is not enough to excrete the waste products. That means if the urine output is less than 400 ml, the waste products tend to accumulate. That is why that cutoff values come. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, fine.
There is no history of fever, no history of.
What is the significance of this thinning of the limbs, extremities?
It can be because of tuberculosis, malignancy.
You have just told us that he had got leg swelling. And now you are saying that marked thinning of the extremities.
Upper limb, sir.
It is not mentioned there.
Okay, sir.
Okay, fine. So either you can say thighs and arms or trunk, whatever it is. Fine.
There's no history of fever, no history of pain abdomen. It's not increase, sir. No history of constipation, nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea. No history of chest pain, palpitation. No history of facial puffiness, hematuria. No history suggestive of hematemesis, melena, bleeding PR. No history of confusion, drowsiness, or alteration of sleep rhythm. There's no history of any swelling.
What swelling did you mean about? Talk about?
Lymph nodes and lymph node enlargement.
Because you had mentioned that leg swelling is already you have mentioned. And now you are saying that no history of swelling. You need to mention swelling at the neck or the groins, whatever the space you want to talk. Be specific on that, okay?
Okay, sir.
Now, why did you talk about facial puffiness and hematuria?
To rule out renal causes of ascites.
Okay, when did it start? If at all it starts, when did it start? Now it is 6 months now.
It will start with edema of the lower limbs and followed by ascites, not ascites followed by.
Now, why is that?
Ascites, it's usually a local pathology.
No. Ascites need not be local pathology. There are so many causes for so many mechanisms, so many causes for the ascites. Okay. Why did you specifically tell us that there is no history of facial puffiness or hematuria? To rule out renal pathology, renal cause. Okay. To rule out renal cause of ascites.
Yes, sir.
Okay. In which condition do you get hematuria and ascites?
Nephritic syndrome.
Nephritic syndrome. Okay. From it can develop even rapidly, within 2 to 3 days, they can develop significant ascites. Very rapid development. Okay. Why do they develop facial puffiness? Do you get facial puffiness in nephritic syndrome or nephrotic syndrome first? Early facial puffiness.
Nephrotic.
Nephrotic syndrome. Why is that?
Reason.
Because the mechanism in nephrotic syndrome is significant hypoalbuminemia, decreased oncotic pressure. Okay.
Okay.
And the patient is recumbent entire night. The retro bulb, around the eyes, the soft tissues are very, the tissue tension is very, very low. The oncotic pressure being less, they leak the fluid first into the periorbital space. Okay. So only when there is significant hypoproteinemia that develops. Why rapid development? Because the massive proteinuria leads to significant hypoproteinemia very rapidly. Unlike other conditions, nephritic syndrome, it takes some days, or other protein-losing enteropathies take several days. Okay, so rapid development of periorbital puffiness. Yesterday it was not there, today it has come all of a sudden, and it is a very boggy eyes. So that is indicative of nephrotic syndrome, especially in children, minimal change disease. Okay, such patient can develop abdominal distension within a day or 2 days. Okay, now you have taken most of the histories, but it is not, all histories are perfect, no issues. I just wanted to modify that
Okay,
and make
sir.
it very brief. Okay.
Okay.
So this is the way to say, oh, sir, this 44-year-old gentleman or old patient has apparently normal 6 months ago. Yes, can you read? I am not able to read that.
Sir, this 44-year-old gentleman was apparently normal 6 months ago when he noticed insidious onset of painless abdominal distension,
There,
which
I
was
have put it as insidious there.
yes, sir.
Insidious because he does not know when did it start. It is not one-day process. It is a very gradual process. He does not know when it has started. And painless abdominal extension. Instead of telling at the end, no abdominal pain, painless abdominal extension. Yes,
Okay,
go
sir.
ahead.
Which was gradually progressive till the date of examination.
Told everything in a one sentence, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
He had marginal improvement in his symptom for few weeks with some medications given by a doctor.
So
However, he had progressive or gradual distension of abdomen thereafter on stopping his medications.
no, that is what I assume. I don't know. You did not give that history. I assume that usually when the ascites is diagnosed and the initial response is there, because he has developed that was 5-6 months ago. Now he has developed leg edema. That means he would have stopped medication in between because he had initial response. So some people may not, unless you repeatedly ask, they may not tell us. He would have skipped medication or he would have indulged in some other precipitating factors. Okay.
Initially, he did not have any leg swelling, but for the last 1 month, 5 months after onset of abdominal distension, he has developed leg swelling on both sides, more in the evening hours and gradually progressing without oliguria, hematuria, or facial puffiness.
Now this one slide or 7 lines will explain all the histories which you have mentioned earlier.
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Fine.
From the onset of symptoms, he had progressive decrease in appetite, easy fatigability, and progressive thinning of thighs and arms. There was no history of other GI symptoms like nausea, vomiting, hematemesis, diarrhea, constipation, melena, or bleeding PR.
Okay, why did you ask about melena, vomiting and other things?
Sir, if it's cirrhosis with portal hypertension, there will be photosystemic anastomosis at esophagus, which will lead to hematemesis, upper GI bleed, and there will be rectal, superior rectal and middle and inferior rectal vein communication in the mid-anal canal, which may lead to bleeding PR.
Melena?
Melena, because of
Any specific reason for the melena?
upper GI bleed, esophageal bleed, which may
Esophageal rupture is, if esophageal varices is rupturing very severely, all of a sudden there may be a large quantity of GI bleed, which will manifest as hematemesis. If it is a small ooze, like patient may have concomitant gastritis as well, or small ooze may be there, that will manifest as melena. Okay.
okay, sir.
Or small amount of blood which stays there in the abdomen for quite a long time. So in such condition, you will get melena. Okay. Fine. Yes.
So the patient doesn't have decrease in appetite. So his appetite is normal.
Perfectly fine, no issue. But I'm talking about natural history. If you are talking about a 6 months patient, a patient with 6 months abdominal distension, recent oliguria or decreased urinary frequency, recent leg swelling, breathlessness, I don't think that in a natural mechanism they should have a normal appetite. Whether it is a cirrhotic ascites, whether it is renal ascites, whether it is cardiac ascites, every patient will have decreased appetite. So I just wanted to highlight that you need to retake the history, find out whether if his appetite is perfectly fine, why did he lose his weight? Thinning of the limbs.
Okay, sir.
So that history does not match one another. Okay. Perfectly normal appetite, progressive breathlessness, progressive ascites, progressive disease, and losing weight. Does not hold good. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Can you tell me one condition where the progressive loss of weight with the increased appetite? Few conditions.
Thyrotoxicosis.
Thyrotoxicosis. Do we anticipate this thyrotoxicosis this patient?
No, sir.
No. What
Diabetes.
else? Diabetes mellitus. Anything else? A patient with gastritis or peptic ulcer disease because they have got hunger pain, no?
Yes, sir.
Significant hunger pain, periodic pain, frequent pain, episodic pain. So they tend to eat because they have accustomed that once eating something will reduce his pain. If that history is there, you can take the history of, you can talk about duodenal ulcer, okay?
Okay.
But again, in duodenal ulcer, there will be no significant weight loss. You have given us this significant weight loss or thinning of the limbs. That is catabolic state. Catabolic state will not occur in the patient with a good appetite.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
So that history you need to reorganize. You need to retake. Because I cannot correlate a patient with such a progressive disease, rapidly progressive disease, or over 15 days he has deteriorated very much, not able to walk in the room, and you say the good appetite, not acceptable to me.
Okay. There is no history of fever during the course of his illness.
Why the fever is important in this patient?
Spontaneous bacterial peritonitis.
It is not only that, any intercurrent illness. In a patient of ascites, if there are fever, the first diagnosis is SBP, possible SBP. But there are so many other conditions. It may be development of the secondary hepatitis, development of respiratory infection, development of urinary, any infection for that matter. Okay, all those things can deteriorate the patient. Any intercurrent illness in a chronic stable ascites patient can deteriorate the symptoms. Progression. Okay.
Okay.
Rapid deterioration of the symptoms.
He complains of breathlessness without wheeze since 15 days, which is progressive. There is no history suggestive of autopnea, PND, trypopnea, platypnea, chest pain, or palpitation.
And again, this is again I'm not very sure. You said that massive abdominal distension causing him breathless, and you said that he is comfortably sleeping in the bed. Is he sleeping with the 1 pillow, 2 pillow, 3 pillow? Did you ask?
No, sir.
It is mandatory to ask. The patient may say, I'm comfortable, but he may be sleeping on the 3 or 4 pillows because the moment he lies flat, the fluid pressure, diaphragm will be pushed up, he will develop orthopnea or breathlessness on supine position. Okay, he will tend to sleep in the head up position. So that's important. What is significant trypopnea in this patient or platypnea in this patient?
In trypopnea, because of ascites, there can be right-sided pleural effusion.
Okay.
And
platypnea not have very massive pleural effusion. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Some of the hepatopulmonary syndromes, they will have typical platypnea. They develop breathlessness on standing up because of the pulmonary AV shunts. There is ventilation perfusion mismatch. They will produce breathlessness on standing up sometimes. Okay.
Okay, sir. He complains of yellowish discoloration of eyes and dark yellowish urine since 1 week. However, there is no history of generalized itching or pale stools.
Now, are you sure that there is no yellowish discoloration of urine or eyes quite long back from the initial days? Or was it he had consulted several doctors earlier? They did not tell about liver disease. He was not told about jaundice, anything. That
No,
is
earlier it was not told.
It was not told. Okay. Or it not elicited. No issue. Okay. Now, what is the importance of the, once you say that yellowish discoloration of eyes, you should always mention about generalized itching and pale. I think clear color stools you have mentioned. What is the significance?
Obstructive jaundice.
Okay. Obstructive jaundice. Okay. Fine. What are the cause of obstruction in a case of cirrhosis? Already known chronic parenchymal liver disease. What are the possible ways they can develop obstructive jaundice later on in the course? Did you get my point? Normally in cirrhosis, do they develop jaundice?
Yes.
Yes? No,
Yes,
if you say cirrhosis, that is something called as chronic parenchymal liver disease. Okay?
Okay, sir.
If they develop deep jaundice from the beginning of the cirrhosis, diagnosis of cirrhosis, that is especially in female, that may be
primary biliary cirrhosis.
Primary biliary cirrhosis, whatever it is, cholangitis or biliary cirrhosis. Okay? Then If they develop to begin with, all cirrhosis does not progress over a day. It takes long time. Okay. So the bilirubin metabolism is the last one to affect, relatively late to affect metabolism function. Okay. So to begin with, beginning of the cirrhosis, in the early course of the cirrhosis, where what we call as compensated chronic pulmonary disease, compensated cirrhosis, they may not have jaundice. Okay. Only when they get decompensated, they develop jaundice.
Okay, sir.
So you can assume that it is a decompensated disease. Similarly, ascites, it will not develop in the well-compensated cirrhosis. The ascites will develop only in the decompensated liver disease. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Now, other causes of jaundice in a cirrhotic patient or chronic pulmonary liver disease, they may have a additional hepatitis. Already, patient has got cirrhosis. He may develop a second hepatitis on them. It may be viral hepatitis. Most commonly, they are all alcoholic patient, alcohol-induced hepatitis. Okay, they can induce jaundice, sudden rise of bilirubin. Okay. Similarly, a chronic liver disease patient who was not having jaundice, but he developed jaundice recently, may indicate development of the hepatocellular carcinoma as well. Along with that, the patient have fever, pain, abdomen, and so many things. Okay. And the nodular regeneration can obstruct the biliary canaliculi. Those are the levels of obstruction in the obstructive jaundice. Okay.
Yes. No history of confusion, drowsiness, or alteration of his sleep rhythm.
Okay. Fine. Why did you take this history?
Hepatic encephalopathy.
Okay. Okay, fine. Now you have told us that he has a significant decrease urine output. What is that? Why is that? Now, what does it tell us? Normally we should lose our sodium through the kidneys. That is a process called as natriuresis. If somebody develops decreased urine output in the background of ascites or liver disease, we assume that his natriuresis has come down. Okay.
Yes. Past history. There is no history of jaundice in the past. No history of blood transfusion, tattooing, body piercing, or injection drug abuse. There is not a known case of diabetes, hypertension, or thyroid disorder. No history of tuberculosis in the past. No past surgical intervention. Drug history. He is not known to be allergic to any drug. For the last 5 months, he is taking 1 tablet on empty stomach and another half of tablet morning and afternoon, and another half of tablet in morning and evening.
Any significance for that? I do not know what tablets are those.
He did not know the tablet names.
Yeah, that is why you need to take little more history. Now I have put the same history without the first thing, without any of this thing. The second thing, for the last 5 months, he is taking some tablets. The details are not available or known to him. However, the tablet relieves his abdominal discomfort when he takes an empty stomach. What do you think it is?
It's
Proton pump inhibitor or tablet which causes increased urine output. We know the diuretic. So you need to tell about those things. Okay. It's just simply taking half tablet doesn't convey any meaning. So what is the action of the tablet to the knowledge of the patient? Okay.
Okay. Family history. No similar complaints in the family.
What is the significance? Because his age is only 40, no? Why did you take the family history?
Diseases like Wilson's disease, hemochromatosis will be familial.
Good. Heritable disease. Okay, fine. And what is the normal age to develop idiopathic? Idiopathic cirrhosis. So-called idiopathic or Indian childhood cirrhosis or something like that. Young age. Okay.
Indian childhood cirrhosis.
What is the age group where to develop cirrhosis in a
young child, young male child? Personal history. He consumes predominantly vegetarian diet. His appetite, when I asked, he told it's normal, sir. Has decreased urination since 1 week. His regular bowel habits. Sleep is adequate. Is chronic alcoholic since 15 years, stopped since 3 months, consumes 360 ml of whiskey per day, which accounts to 144 grams per day. Is chronic smoker since 15 years, stopped since 3 months, smokes 1 bundle of BD per day, with 15 pack years.
Now, what is the significance here?
Alcohol consumption of more than 80 grams per day in male for more than 10 years.
Oh, okay, but still there is one more thing. Because his illness was diagnosed 6 months ago, but he was continuing to consume alcohol.
For 3 months.
Yes, that is very significant. So he had more and more chance of, that may be one of the reasons for his rapid progression, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the other grams and all we have discussed in the previous class. Okay.
Summary. A 44-year-old gentleman, Mr. XYZ, who is chronic alcoholic and smoker since 15 years, with history of distension of abdomen since 6 months, for which he is on medication with partial relief in first month, but later worsening of symptoms in spite of treatment. Fatigue since 4 months, pedal edema and breathlessness since 15 days, jaundice since 1 week, and thinning of extremities since 6 months.
Okay, now do you think that SIDs will produce fatigue?
Because of cirrhosis.
Wait. Because you have said that based on history, it might be a case of massive ascites. You have told us that there is no breathlessness on supine position. You have told us that. Now, what happens when there is a massive ascites? The pressure, intra-abdominal pressure goes is very high. Okay.
Diaphragm may be pushed upwards.
So that breathlessness is one part. The another part is that even the stomach, which is a hollow viscous, will get compressed, and they will not have the good appetite. You said a patient has got good appetite. Those are the 2 points against your massive ascites. Minimal ascites still is possible, but massive ascites, in the history you have given, there are 2 oddities. One is no breathlessness supine position and very good appetite. Okay.
Okay.
So jaundice is not a part of the ascites. Okay. Anyway, we'll go further.
The cause may be, considering alcoholic history, ascites followed by pedal edema and jaundice. It may be a case of cirrhosis of liver with portal hypertension. Due to marked thinning of extremities in 6 months, malignant ascites can be considered. As tuberculosis is very common in our country, tubercular ascites is a probability. And differential diagnosis may be anemia with hypoproteinemia.
Okay, what are the causes for the thinning of the limbs? One is, can it occur in the cirrhosis?
Yes, sir.
It can occur in cirrhosis. It can occur in malignant disease. But if it is a malignant disease, patient should have had a fever.
Rapidity of onset.
No, it need not be very, 6 months is fair enough. Some other primary was there, which is progressive. Yes. Tuberculosis can lead the weight loss. Even cardiac failure can produce that. Okay.
Okay.
Now, I will slightly modify your discussion on this summary.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, my patient is a 44-year-old chronic heavy alcoholic and smoker, presented with...
That I have put in there itself, chronic heavy alcoholic and smoker. Okay, fine, go ahead.
Presented with gradually progressive painless abdominal distension and recent edema and yellow eyes. He has easy fatigability and progressive thinning of limbs, but he does not have oliguria, hematuria, or any symptoms of GI bleed. He is non-hypertensive, non-diabetic, and not known to have any cardiac disease.
Is it important? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Cardiac disease, a person who is on cardiac disease also can manifest with the same thing, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Suppose if it is cardiac hypertension or rheumatic heart disease or some non-cardiac disease, after a few months, they may develop abdominal distension. Normally, what happens in cardiac failure?
There will be edema first, followed by...
But there are some conditions wherein the ascites can develop very rapidly. First, then on leg edema. Last time we have discussed, it is called as ascites precox. Constrictive pericarditis or very rapid constrictive pericarditis, very rapid development of cardiac failure. because of the very significant increased systemic venous congestion, very high pressure in the vena cava, and they produce the lymphatic leak or the leak into the ascites first. Okay.
Yes. I consider him to be having ascites.
Okay, that is sure. There is no doubt. I have
Yes.
no objection on that.
Most likely due to decompensated chronic parenchymal liver disease, cirrhosis due to all.
Why do I say decompensated chronic parenchymal liver disease?
Because of jaundice and ascites.
What are the stages of chronic parenchymal liver disease? Even chronic hepatitis. There are so many things called
Steatohepatitis.
chronic steatohepatitis is not a chronic parenchymal liver disease. That is a part of fatty liver and fatty hepatitis. Beyond that, they go on to the chronic stage. Previously, it was called as chronic persistent hepatitis, chronic active hepatitis, okay, and chronic lobular hepatitis. They all form the phase of chronic hepatitis. They become the chronic parenchymal liver. But in such condition, the liver function will be retained. All synthetic metabolic functions of the liver will be maintained in the chronic hepatitic stage. Okay. Then they progress further to produce cirrhosis. There is more fibrosis, ongoing necrosis, and nodal regeneration. That is a cirrhotic stage. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Even in the early stages, maybe years together, initially several years, if there is no ongoing toxins or the bombardment of the insulting agent to the liver, they can go on with the several years without any symptoms. Many often it is diagnosed only on routine investigation, that too not liver function but ultrasound. Okay, so they are asymptomatic. Bilirubin metabolism, their albumin metabolism, they're all metabolic factors or synthetic factors are normal. In that stage of chronic liver disease, that cirrhosis is called as
Compensated
chronic parenchymal liver disease or cirrhosis. Now, in this patient, we have one thing, that is presence of jaundice and presence of ascites. The ascites is usually due to
portal hypertension.
It is not only portal hypertension,
Hypoproteinemia.
Combination of the hypoproteinemia and portal hypertension. And there is a problem with the splanchnic autoregulation. Okay, all those things lead to the ascites.
Yes.
Now, we all know that this patient had indulged in alcoholism for quite a long time and a very high dose. So more likely alcohol-induced chronic decompensated parenchymal liver disease leading on to ascites. Is it ascites alone? We can also
Ascites with pedal edema, lower limb.
Okay, that's okay. Everything is this disease only. Can we say that patient is having portal hypertension at this stage with the history stage?
No, sir.
No. Why not?
Because we should see splenomegaly.
No. History wise, you cannot talk about splenomegaly. There is
GI
no
bleed.
GI bleed or melena, hematemesis and melena. That is why I do not consider to be having portal hypertension at this stage.
Okay.
What are the other complications? Encephalopathy.
Encephalopathy.
You said sleep is perfectly fine.
Yes, sir.
And orientation fine. All those things you have taken in history. So there are no complications like portal hypertension, esophageal varices, or hepatic encephalopathy at this stage. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then, that is why I said I'm not sure about portal hypertension at this stage because he does not give history of suggestive bleed. Okay.
Yes.
Ascites can also be renal, isn't it? Renal ascites, as in nephrotic syndrome, AGN, ESRD. These are unlikely due to lack of oliguria, start to begin with. Hematuria, facial puffiness. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Similarly, cardiac condition is unlikely. Cardiac ascite is also unlikely due to absence of palpitation, breathlessness, or many things. Okay. So now we are talking about a predominant patient with a predominant ascites. These are the differential diagnoses, and this is the way to organize that. Okay.
Okay.
Are there any other differential diagnoses?
Chronic Budd-Chiari syndrome.
Last time we have discussed about Budd-Chiari syndrome, acute Budd-Chiari syndrome. But if it is chronic Budd-Chiari syndrome, that can also manifest with the abdominal distension lasting for months together. There may not be edema at all. Okay? Because the mechanism of Budd-Chiari syndrome is that hepatic venous thrombosis. There is hepatic congestion. The sinusoidal porus will open up and the lymph-rich fluid will be coming into the peritoneal cavity, leading to the chylous ascites, long-standing. Okay? So they may not have any pain. They may not have any fever. But they will have massive hepatomegaly later on when you examine. So, but because this patient had 6 months history of abdominal distension without leg swelling, you have to consider Budd-Chiari, chronic Budd-Chiari syndrome, especially for the postgraduate residents. One of the different malignant ascites you have said, tubercular ascites, cardiac ascites, hypoproteinemic ascites. It is not just anemia, all hypoproteinemic. But you need to talk about condition favoring and against. The factors favoring and against. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Physical examination. A 44-year gentleman who is moderately built and poorly nourished, conscious, cooperative and well-oriented to time, place and person. His vitals are, his pulse is 64 beats per minute, regular, good volume, normal character. Blood pressure is 110 by 70 millimeters of mercury measured in right arm in supine position. His respiratory rate is 30 cycles per minute, which is thoraco-abdominal. He is afebrile at the time of examination. His weight is 52.2 kg, height is 163 centimeter, and BMI is 19.64.
Is there any problem with the blood pressure, pulse pressure? Blood pressure and pulse pressure? Normal. You have told us a patient who has got a significant ascites. You have described it as a massive ascites and oliguria. And what do you think that pulse volume will be? Because he has lost almost about 5 to 6 liters into the third space. Isn't it? Intravascular volume you anticipate to be lower. So blood pressure and pulse pressure, you should be extra cautious.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Okay, sir.
Even in early stages, there may be hyperthermic circulation, there may be bounding pulse. But when you say patient has gone to the stage of oliguria, okay?
Yes, sir.
And the respiratory rate is 30 cycles per minute. That means he is tachypneic.
Yes, sir.
And you said patient is comfortable. Okay, those are the small things you need to modify.
Okay, sir.
Now, I do not expect any one of you to record BMI in this patient. Why?
Ascites, because of that there will be
any patient with edema or ascites, you do not calculate BMI because it gives a erroneous result. Okay, you can talk about nutrition, looking at the skin fold thickness, subcutaneous fat thickness around the triceps or over the scapula, either with the pinching hand methods with 1 inch apart or with the French caliper. There are so many calipers are available. You can tell about that nutrition. You need to talk about nutrition, about the facial pad of fat, buccal pad of fat, and other fat. Okay?
Okay, sir.
So nutrition factor is more important than the BMI in this patient.
Yes, sir.
And again, the pulse rate you have said only 64, whereas the respiratory cycle is 30. Any problem with there?
He's on beta blockers, sir. He may be on beta blockers.
You did not tell in the history. You said details are not known.
He may be taking it.
He may, yeah, you can tell that. He may be taking beta blocker. Okay. Otherwise, he should have told in that history that he is taking some drugs. Okay. The details are available, whatever it is. Okay. Yes.
Head to toe examination. Hair is sparse. Icterus is present. Pallor is present. No koilonychia, angular stomatitis, purpura or sternal tenderness. There are two spider nevi on the chest. There's uniform distension of abdomen. Distended veins over lateral aspect of abdomen. Umbilical hernia is present. Other hernial orifices are normal. Bilateral pitting pedal edema is present. There is no parotid swelling, palmar erythema, leukonychia, uterine contracture, testicular atrophy, gynecomastia or flapping tremors. There is no lymphadenopathy, clubbing or cyanosis.
Of course, some people will insist you to talk about head-to-toe examination, but what I suggest is that you should be focused onto the case. Okay, the head-to-toe examination is given in the textbooks to say that you should not miss even a single point. That is the importance. Okay. Now here you have said about the previously you said about vitals. Then you need to talk about general appearance. Okay. Then you need to talk about presence of common things, pallor. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Lymphadenopathy, edema, and other things. Then you talk about this case we have discussed that probably it's a case of chronic parenchymal liver disease. You need to talk about general features of chronic liver disease.
Okay, sir.
Whereas abdominal distension, umbilical hernia are not the part of general examination.
Okay, sir.
They're part of the specific part of the systemic examination. You can mention here, but again you need to mention two places. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So see this, I will put it as a general examination. Pallor, whatever you have said is fine. I do agree that. And when you say that icteric is present, but there are no scratch markers over the trunk. Predominantly, if there is a obstructive thing, they will have the scratch markers over the trunk. Or even in cirrhosis, when they develop significant jaundice, they will develop scratch marks. Okay, significant hepatic failure. So where to look for jaundice? I think I put a figure there.
Upper pulp. So
Why do you want to look at
there? Because it's less exposed to sunlight and there's more elastic and there's more collagen because
elastin fibers.
Elastin.
And that is a white. Normally it's a white sclera. Okay, white background. Slightest change will be seen there best. Whereas lower part may be muddy, may be mistaken. Okay. Then you have talked about other features of chronic liver disease. Sparse hair. Where did you look for the sparse hair? On the scalp or the beard?
Where? Chest.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Where did you look for the sparse hair?
He had sparse hair. He had sparse hair in the head, scalp itself, sir.
Scalp hair is not very important. You should look for the beard. You should look for the axillary hair. You should look for the pubic hair. Okay? That is more important than the baldness. Baldness always does not say chronic liver disease, but these things are hyperestrogenism. Okay? Then you talked about spider navy. I think those are the things where you give the central pressure, it blanches. Again, hyperestrogenism. You talked about bilateral pitting edema. To what extent, whether it is symmetrical, asymmetrical, tender, non-tender, you need to mention here. Again, it is better to say that whether it is a fast edema or slow edema. Last class I have told you what is fast edema, what is slow edema. If it is fast edema, refills within 40 seconds, it always indicate that hyperproteinemic edema. And any patient of hyperproteinemia, they will not have elevated JVP or positive hepatojugular reflex. The moment, like you said, the pallor is along with that, you have mentioned so many things, no? Similarly, the moment you say pitting edema, you should talk about JVP. Or when you talk about JVP, you should talk about edema. So they are all linked to one another. Tell about mechanism of edema. Somebody who got edema, pitting edema with elevated JVP or positive hepatojugular reflex, it indicates that increased hydrostatic pressure or increased blood volume, intravascular volume. Whereas pitting edema is there, no JVP, no hepatojugular reflex. It indicates that intravascular volume is low. Still there is edema that indicates that it is hypoalbuminic or decreased osmotic pressure. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
How did you look for distal weight and subdomen?
The patient was made to stand.
Okay. But that is generally a part of systemic examination.
Okay.
Parotid swelling specifically tells about alcoholic liver disease. That is supposed to be some autoimmune induced. There is no definitive reason for the parotid swelling, but that is common association with the alcoholic cirrhosis. Was it there in this patient?
No, sir.
Okay. Palmar erythema, leukocythemia, and Dupuytren's contraction. Those are the things. Okay. Gynecomastia. So these are the things. Whenever you talk about some findings, whatever is there, it's better to highlight like this. So it will show everyone that these are the findings were there. Okay.
Yes, sir. Adenopathy, clubbing, or cyanosis. On inspection, there's generalized distension of abdomen, flanks appear full, skin is glossy, umbilical hernia is present, other hernia orifices are normal, superficial veins are visible and dilated on lateral aspects. All regions move equally with respiration. There is no visible scars, sinuses, pulsation, or peristalsis.
Now you had started with the head to toe examination. What inspection you are doing now?
Abdomen.
You should
For
have done
abdomen.
abdominal examination. Before doing abdominal examination, you are supposed to do the oral cavity, upper GI, or at least oral cavity examination. Don't forget to mention about oral cavity, oral hygiene, because this is a 40-year-old male patient, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Liver disease. You said thinning of the limbs. What else can happen? What are the oral manifestation of systemic disease? You're talking about GIT case. You did not mention about oral cavity, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So never forget. What are the oral manifestation of systemic disease? By looking at the oral cavity, you can diagnose so many systemic disease. Systemic.
Leukoplakia.
Okay. One is somebody is writing candidiasis. Yes, candidiasis can occur. Extensive oral candidiasis, maybe in the immunocompromised state. There may be petechiae, especially in this case. Petechiae gum bleeding may be there. Angular cheilitis, glossitis, beefy red tongue, maybe vitamin deficiency, iron deficiency. Isn't it? There is a systemic disease.
Yes, sir.
The patient, you said pallor is there, but you need to talk about even at oral cavity, okay?
Yes, sir.
Then, if you find a small whitish plaque on the side of the leg, side of the tongue, it may be hairy leukoplakia. In such a patient with a 40-year-old male patient with thinning of the limbs. Any possibility?
If
That is a HIV AIDS defining illness. It is called as oral hairy leukoplakia, isn't it? Caused by the Epstein-Barr virus. So there are so many things in the set. And when you talk to the patient, oral cavity, in a patient who is having a chronic liver disease, who is having jaundice, what do you anticipate? By talking to the patient, what positive signs you get?
Halitosis.
You get a halitosis, fetor hepaticus. So those things, don't forget about those things. Those are very relevant things in this patient, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So you need to talk about inspection of the abdomen, not just inspection, okay?
Yes, sir.
Because I think 1, 2, 3, we have talked about head to toe examination, then just directly to the inspection of which system? Abdominal system. Okay, abdominal examination. Okay, fine. So you need to mention oral cavity and examination of abdomen. Okay, fine.
Yes, sir.
So those are the way to look for the abdominal, distended abdominal vein. Always should be examined in the standing position. In the supine position, it may not be visible sometimes. Yes.
Palpation. It is done in supine position with both limbs flexed and hands by side of the body. There is no tenderness or local rise of temperature. Divarication of recti is present. Umbilical hernia is present, which is reducible. Distended veins on both the flanks and flow is from below upwards. No features of caput medicae. Spleen is palpable 2 centimeters below the left costal margin by dipping method. It's non-tender and not spelt. PR examination is not done correctly.
Now there are some problem here in this thing. Palpation, you did not mention. First you said you have mentioned about distended veins in the both flanks. Diverification is okay. Umbilical hernia, there is very common thing, umbilical hernia, to be appearing in a patient who has got significant long-standing ascites and even other hernia because increase intra-abdominal pressure. Okay, so that you need to talk about reducibility. Flow in the abdominal vein from below upwards, where if it is infraumbilical or supraumbilical?
Both, sir. Both above and.
Then it is not normal. Okay. Then it is not normal. There is some other diagnosis. What is the diagnosis? I'll come back to that slide. If infraumbilical, normally, how does it drain from the umbilicus
Too
above, from the level of umbilicus above it goes above,
away from.
and below it goes down, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Now here are talking about both sides is going above, below, upwards. That means there is
IVC
a problem,
obstruction.
IVC obstruction. Okay. Now,
Yes,
if it is IVC obstruction, it is not the only the flanks, the vessels in the flanks. They will also have the vessels in the anterior wall as well. Large vessels, tortuous vessels, IVC obstruction. They are not small vessels. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Then that is one point I just want to highlight. The second thing, you said spleen is palpable 2 centimeters below the left costal margin. That means just palpable.
Yes, sir.
And where do you think the splenic notch will be? Is it the tip of the spleen or center of the spleen?
Center of the spleen.
Then if it is 2 centimeters palpable, how can the notch palpable? Again, technically not possible. Did you get my point?
Yes, sir.
Only when the spleen enlarges so much, it is coming down to at least 7 centimeters of enlargement, then only notch will be palpable. 2 centimeters spleen, notch will not be palpable.
Okay,
Do
sir.
you understand the problem?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Now, why did you bring the measurement here? After all palpation, measurement should have been done in the beginning of palpation.
Okay,
Okay.
sir. Yes, sir.
Even before you talk about the umbilical distension, all those things, you need to talk about
Measurements.
measurement.
Abdominal girth at the level of umbilicus, it's 84 centimeter. From xiphisternum to pubic symphysis, it's 42 centimeter. From xiphisternum to umbilicus, it's 24. And from umbilicus to pubic symphysis, it is 18 centimeter. From right anterior superior iliac spine to umbilicus,
Any
it's
abnormality
18
there? Any abnormality there? Nothing significant, isn't it? Everything is. But suppose if the one side, right ASIS to the left ASIS, there is a significant difference. It says that it is a lateralized swelling. Like especially female, it may be a ovarian, large ovarian cyst. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Or suppose if the lower abdomen is very significant, it may be uterine mass. Okay. Upper abdomen is smaller, lower abdomen to the more. Okay. Fine. So many things. Now, this is the way to talk the palpation. Done in supine position, no tenderness, local raise, fine. Umbilical hernia is present, reducible, fine. On standing, distant veins are noted in the both flanks with the normal pattern of flow or abnormal pattern of flow. If it is abnormal, what is the abnormal pattern of flow? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Normal pattern, I have already told you that it should be both way sides, it's away from the umbilicus.
Umbilicus.
From the above umbilicus, it goes to the SVC system. Below the umbilicus, go to the AVC system. Okay. Now you told us the abnormal flow. So that indicate that there is IVC obstruction.
Yes, sir.
Abdominal girth. Then you talk about abdominal girth, whatever it is. Then liver. You have not mentioned anything about liver palpability. Whether it's palpable or not palpable, you have to mention.
Not palpable, sir.
Even if it's not palpable, when the spleen is palpable, liver is not. Don't you anticipate a liver palpability?
If it's end stage of cirrhosis, won't be palpable.
But alcoholic cirrhosis, palpable alcoholic cirrhosis usually produces, because they have fatty degeneration as well. They usually palpable liver. Hepatomegaly is a dictum in alcoholic cirrhosis. But whereas both hepatitis cirrhosis, there will be shrunken cirrhosis. Okay. Or non-palpable liver is a acute ferment hepatic failure. Usually alcoholic cirrhosis in the mid up to fairly long time will be palpable and enlarged liver. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Because there is additional fatty infiltration there. Spleen is palpable to below margin. By dipping method. Okay. You need to talk about other palpable mass other than liver and spleen. Sometimes gallbladder may be palpable, sometimes kidneys may be palpable, other mesenteric cysts may be palpable, or gut mass may be palpable, because that also can lead to the ascites, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And you need to talk about hernial orifices, again in the standing position, and you need to talk about no cough impulse. Don't forget about renal angle tenderness. Okay. Sometimes large mass may be a polycystic kidney. Okay. Okay. Along with the PR, you need to also talk about testicular examination.
Okay,
If
sir.
you're not done, you have to mention that per rectum and testicular examination has not been done.
Okay, sir.
Now, this is the way to look for.
Filling of vein.
It is not
Ve-
swelling, filling.
veins, filling of vein.
Now, this is how it radiates above, and any reasonable segment you need to take, straight segment you need to take, and you need to look for the filling of the. In cirrhosis, by dictum, it radiates from the away from the
Umbilicus.
umbilicus. Okay.
On percussion, liver dullness, upper border of liver dullness is in 5th intercostal space in mid-clavicular line. Lower border could not be appreciated. Splenic dullness, upper border is 8 cm above the left anterior costal margin in mid-axillary line. Shifting dullness is present and fluid thrill is present.
What did you mean by shifting dullness and fluid thrill? I could understand, no issue. Both are positive.
Yes, sir.
Now, when you say shifting dullness is present, they usually indicate there is a tense ascites. Shifting dullness. I mean, the fluid thrill always indicates tense ascites. That means the balloon is full. There is no place for the air there. So the shifting dullness is very, 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 very unlikely in a patient who has got a shifting fluid thrill. That is a classical thing. But I do agree that it can coexist in 20% of people. Majority, shifting dullness in a mild to moderate case. Very severe tense ascites, you will not be able to elicit the shifting dullness when you get the fluid thrill. Okay?
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
And there is one point. The second thing, the liver dullness, lower border. If the lower border could not, why it's not appreciated? You are palpating from the lower, in the mid-clavicular line, from the lower end, you are going up. You should be able to differentiate the fluid dullness to the hepatic dullness. You should be able to identify. You cannot say lower border could not. Palpation, it may not be palpable, but on a percussion with various techniques, you should be able to percuss the lower border and measure the liver span. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Both in the mid-sternal line as well as in the mid-clavicular line. Now, again, the problem with the splenic dullness, splenic percussion. Splenic percussion, there are so many methods we have discussed last time. We are not talking about upper border. Splenic dullness, upper border. Upper border will not be able to percuss. We are talking about lower border. Okay?
Okay, sir.
We are talking about lower border splenic dullness. If it is beyond up to 8 centimeter, I have got slides for that. Okay, this is about hepatic. I'll come back to the splenic dullness. This is the liver dullness. You need to look for the in both mid-sternal line and the mid-clavicular line to look for the liver span. The importance we have already said. The spleen. Now look at this. When the spleen enlarges from this, it will enlarge like this. And if the percussion, if the lower border of the spleen is percussible up to 8 centimeter, or that is called as spleen is enlarged. Okay. Or if the top space is dull, then also you can talk about spleen is, or at least Castle space. Splenic percussion should be done always in the easiest method is Castle's point. That is the 10th anterior tip of the 10th rib in the which
anterior
line?
Anterior
line. You keep percussing there. You ask the patient to take deep breath. During deep breath, if the spleen, usually infradiaphragmatic, is pushed down, it becomes dull. And on expiration, the diaphragm goes up along with that, spleen also goes up, it becomes resonant. That is the easiest method to percuss for the spleen. Castle's point and Castle's method, okay? Okay. This is how, this is the Castle's method. During inspiration, it comes down. See the mark is here. This particular point will become dull. And in the picture also it is shown there. So this picture, during inspiration, expiration, diaphragm is going up during expiration, coming down during inspiration, and this point will become dull if the spleen is enlarged. That is only minimally enlarged. To be palpable, how much would be the splenic size should be enlarging?
2 to 3 times the normal.
Volume, not just the length, it is the entire volume. Okay? Volume of the spleen has to go by 3 times. Then only spleen will be palpable. The best way to palpate the spleen is the putting the patient on the right lateral position and percuss by the hooking method. That is also a good way to palpate and percuss. Okay. And even percussion, casual percussion can be done in the either in the supine position or in the lateral position. Okay. Now these are the techniques you know.
Fluid.
Okay. Fluid thrill that is seen only in the tense ascites, whereas shifting dullness is seen in the minimal or moderate ascites, not very tense ascites. Okay.
Auscultation. Normal bowel sounds are heard. There is no venous hum over upper abdomen, friction rub or bruit.
What are the conditions where do you get venous hum?
Venous hum in portal hypertension because of collaterals.
Okay, maybe audible. Anywhere else? Any other bruit? Hepatic.
Bruit in hepatocellular carcinoma or a hepatic artery aneurysm.
Large hemangiomas. Okay, somebody is putting a Scoville syndrome, CB syndrome, and that is
venous hum.
What is that?
Venous hum.
Okay, venous hum due to the
portal hypertension.
Portosystemic shunt in the falciparum ligament. Okay, now what else?
In systemic examination, respiratory system, normal vesicular breath sounds are heard bilaterally. There are no added sounds.
Now again, I would like to highlight here. You have said that he has got respirator of 30. He has got significant breathlessness, and you are saying that respiratory system is perfectly fine. Again, you should be extra cautious, auscultating the lung bases for the crepitations or sound. And last time I told you tidal percussion to look for the infradiaphragmatic or supradiaphragmatic fluid. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Cardiovascular system, S1 and S2 are heard normally, no murmurs. Central nervous system, higher mental functions are normal.
Do you anticipate a murmur in this patient? In a hepatic patient, do you anticipate murmur? Yes, in cirrhosis.
Anemia.
Because they will have hyperthermic circulation, they'll be having pulmonary ejection murmur. That is one thing. And again, for the anemia as well. Okay. And they may have some bruise here and there because of in a hepatopulmonary syndrome, there is a AV shunting. They may have the bruise here and there. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay. Central nervous system, higher mental functions are normal, no flapping tremors, no neurodeficits. Genitourinary system is normal.
What do you mean by genitourinary system? How did you examine?
So testicular atrophy and for scrotal edema.
That is not the part of this thing. That is a part of abdominal examination. You should mention there. Okay. If you have done it. Okay.
Provisional diagnosis. A 44-year-old gentleman, Mr. XYZ, who is chronic alcoholic and smoker since 15 years, with history of distension of abdomen since 6 months, for which he is on medication, with partial relief in the first 2 months, but later worsening of...
Not required here. Very briefly, you need to mention about progressive ascites, recent onset of leg edema, and recent jaundice, without altered sleep rhythm, without hematemesis or GI blood loss. These are the only 5 points. In a chronic alcoholic and chronic smoker. Okay. And on examination, he has got
full flanks, uniform.
Before full flanks, you need to talk about general examination, general findings.
Spider nevy.
Edema without
JVP, elevation of JVP.
Icterus without any other significant, and 2 spider nevy, which doesn't have any significance, without any other features of chronic liver disease. Did he had anything other than this?
No, sir.
Okay. Then?
On full flanks, uniform distension of...
examination, you got features of ascites in the form of full flanks, shifting dullness or fluid thrill, whatever is one thing.
It's splenomegaly.
Non-palpable liver.
Okay, sir.
And I could not elicit the liver span as well. And splenomegaly. Okay. Now?
Based on these findings, it may be a case of ascites.
No, you cannot talk about ascites now because you have so many features there. You need to talk about first is chronic parenchymal liver disease. Why do you say chronic parenchymal liver disease?
Because of icterus is present and
Chronic alcoholism, one thing. Okay.
okay,
Thinning
sir.
of the limbs, jaundice, ascites, then leg swelling. So so many decompensating features are there. Decompensated chronic parenchymal liver disease, followed by what is the next complication he had? What are the things he has? By your exam, by these 5-6 lines you have put already. I put the red to the splenomegaly. The moment in a patient with the decompensated liver disease, splenomegaly is present, that always
Portal hypertension.
pathognomonic sign of portal hypertension. So chronic decompensated liver disease, portal hypertension, and ascites. So everything can be said in the one line here. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Without hepatic encephalopathy.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Ascites points in favor are based on history. There's gradual distension of abdomens in 6 months. Based on examination, flanks are full shift.
Okay, fine. Now here after examination, you can say simply say that presence of fluid thrill. It is a definitive sign. Or presence of shifting dullness. It's a definitive sign. You need not go back again for the history there.
Okay,
Ascites is because presence of shifting dullness or fluid thrill or the pedal sign, whatever it is.
okay, sir.
Ascites is 100%. There is no doubt.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Chronic liver disease is also fine. Chronic alcoholic, presence of jaundice, spider navis, splenomegaly, everything. But splenomegaly always tells about
Portal hypertension.
portal hypertension. That has to be included there. Normal appetite is against, absolutely against a patient with chronic liver disease or any end-stage liver disease for that matter.
Okay.
Because it's hypercatabolic state, all including cardiac failure, renal failure, anything will have a cytokine-induced appetite suppression, especially in a patient who got fluid thrill. I've told you the mechanism. Very significant intra-abdominal pressure. Stomach cannot be distendable. There will be early satiety. Okay.
Okay. The causes for rapid worsening in last 2 weeks can be because of progression of disease, but other causes are subacute bacterial peritonitis, diuretic overdosage, intercurrent infection, upper GI bleed, but the history and examination findings do not favor any of the above precipitating factors.
There will be occult bleed, which patient has not observed.
Occult bleed, maybe.
Occult bleed, GI blood loss, occult GI blood loss. Patient doesn't know, doesn't understand you were asking him about melena, or he did not notice. Possible. Okay.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other intercurrent illness? Or he has developed some other complication like we have previously. Second disease. No, when there is end-stage renal disease, they also can lead to the sympathetic renal failure called as hepatorenal syndrome, wherein they develop rapid deterioration in urine output, rapid worsening of the renal functions. Okay.
Okay.
Something called as hepatorenal syndrome. That is also possible because you have said decreased urine output and decreased urine frequency. Okay.
Okay, sir. Malignant ascites points in favor are they can be because of marked thinning of extremities, and points against are there is no mass, bruit or palpable lymph node, and 6 months history and absence of fever.
Okay.
And tuberculosis.
Wait. Yeah. Oh, malignant ascite. Which malignancy you are talking about?
Any
malignant? No. When we talk
GI
about
malignancy.
When we talk about ascites due to malignancy, they are called as peritoneal carcinomatosis. They're usually from the adenocarcinoma. From the GI, they can seed into the peritoneum. From the ovary, they can seed into the peritoneum. Okay. So they're all called as peritoneal carcinomatosis. Okay. So they usually have fever, cytokine release, sweating, abdominal pain, many things. Okay.
Tuberculous ascites points in favor are thinning of extremities and points against are absence of fever.
It's only thing. Anything else?
In tuberculous peritonitis, there will be pain.
Yeah, pain abdomen, lack of appetite. Okay, evening rise of temperature, chronic constipation, It is not only peritonitis when it's persisting for like there may be intestinal tuberculosis. They may present as obstruction as well, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So now this patient has got ascites 100% and has got jaundice. We'll club together. What are the possibility in a patient who has got ascites with jaundice? One is cirrhosis. As I said, it will produce a mild jaundice. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Agreed.
Yes, sir.
Now this cirrhotic patient will because this patient was indulging on alcohol, he may be having alcohol-induced hepatitis that can produce jaundice. Cirrhosis, ascites with jaundice. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Cirrhosis developing with the hepatocellular carcinoma again can produce jaundice, but along with the pain, fever. Okay.
Okay, sir.
I've told you Budd-Chiari syndrome again can produce jaundice, ascites, and abdominal pain. Biliary obstruction and cirrhosis with congestive heart. All these things will produce. These are the different diagnoses for the ascites
With
with
jaundice.
jaundice in a cirrhotic patient, or even otherwise. Okay.
Yes.
Fine. Now we have one more combination here.
Ascites
Of course,
with
this patient did not have abdominal pain, isn't it? If
He
you had
did not
abdominal,
have-
if you had abdominal pain, these are the different diagnoses. Cirrhosis in the SPP, tubercular peritonitis, pancreatic ascites, peritoneal carcinomatosis, cirrhosis with the, all these things are possible in a patient who has got ascites and pain abdomen. That's how you approach the combination of symptoms. Then, what investigation would you like to do?
routine blood investigations, CBC,
What do you anticipate in CBC?
in CBC, they may decrease platelet count.
Why
And-
platelet count is decreased?
It's produced in the liver. So, yeah.
Thrombopoietin is produced in liver. So in all chronic pancreatitis, the first hematological parameter to become abnormal is platelet count. Platelet count is decreased. Okay. Then it can also produce anemia, hemoglobin reduction. What type of hemoglobin reduction?
In his alcoholic, so it can be megaloblastic, vitamin B12 deficiency, macrocytic
What are the
anemia.
reasons for the anemia? One is vitamin B12 deficiency or nutritional deficiency.
And in if he has upper GI bleed,
Upper GI bleed, occult blood loss anemia.
and
And you know this, the liver disease, what does it do? The toxins are not metabolized, isn't it? All these toxins which are circulated, non-metabolized toxins will suppress the bone marrow. There may be direct bone marrow suppression due to the chronic
normocytic
bone marrow suppression. Okay. Then you have a splenic enlarged spleen, isn't it? Large enlarged spleen, portal hypertension.
hemolytic anemia.
It is called as hypersplenism.
Okay, sir.
Hyperfunctioning of the spleen. Okay. So those are the reasons for the anemia in a patient with cirrhosis. Okay. Why do you want to look for the prothrombin time?
Prothrombin time will be decreased.
Decreased.
Increased. Prothrombin time will be increased, and
Always test the liver synthesizes various clotting
factors except 8.
Okay. Now, when those clotting factors have got a very short half-life. Okay. In a few seconds and minutes, not even hours. Okay. So if the liver fails acutely, the entire liver fails, what happens? The clotting factors which have got a shortest half-life will stop functioning. So the prothrombin tends to prolong. The earliest sign of the earliest investigative indicating that acute liver failure, hepatic failure, synthetic failure. In a long run, what tells you about synthetic failure? Chronic liver disease. What does it tell you about? Which investigation will tell you that chronic liver failure? Simple. Albumin. Albumin has got a half-life of about 17 to 25 days. Isn't it? So to produce hypoalbuminemia in a liver disease, it takes months together. So the moment you say hypoalbuminemia is there, it indicates that liver is not synthesizing adequate albumin for a quite long time. Okay? Fine. Stool occult blood?
For portal hypertension to see.
Okay. So at least
upper GI bleed.
Okay. liver function test, what are the things you give the importance? Bilirubin. What type of bilirubin you anticipate in this particular patient? Conjugated bilirubinemia or unconjugated bilirubinemia? Liver is not functioning well. Liver is diseased.
Mild.
Predominantly unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. It is not 100% maybe conjugate, both, but
Both.
right, unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. What will you anticipate in the liver enzymes? STPT, STBOT, or AST, ALT?
AST, ALT will be slightly elevated.
Slightly elevated, not very high level, unless if it is elevated
Hepatitis.
200, 5 times elevation, it is called as superadded hepatitis is there. Okay. SGOT elevation, SGOT is 150, SGPT is 60. What does it tell you? Normally, in all hepatitis or liver disease, SGPT slightly elevates more than the SGOT. If SGOT is more than 2 times more than the SGPT, it always tells you that
Alcoholic hepatitis.
Or alcohol, toxin and drug-induced hepatitis. At the same time, GGT also will be elevated in both these conditions. Okay.
Yes.
If the alkaline phosphate is markedly elevated, what does it tell you?
Obstruction.
Obstructive jaundice. Okay, fine. Biliary canal is abnormal. Okay. And then you need to do the markers of the liver damage. Suppose we do not know he had a alcoholic history, but it may be superadded with the hepatitis B or hepatitis C. Both can induce cirrhosis, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Because normally alcohol will, okay, these two things can produce alcohol, hepatitis B or hepatitis combination can induce more chance of cirrhosis, isn't it? So you need to look for the all tests for the hepatitis B surface antigen, anti-HCV, all those things have to be done in the part of liver function test. Okay. Then USG abdomen, I think last class we have discussed. It can tell you about the texture of the liver, size of the liver, are there any focal lesions in the liver, and are there any hepatic vein thrombosis? What is the size of the portal vein? Normally, portal vein size of about how much? Up to 11 millimeters is normal. If it is beyond 14 millimeters, definitely dilated portal vein. The primary, you need to look for the portal vein to the hepatic vein gradient. Normal gradient is less than 5. If it is more than 5, it is abnormal. If the portal to the hepatic vein gradient is more than 12, it heralds the development of the variceal bleed, varices and variceal bleed. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Then you can look at the splenic size. You can look at the collaterals. You can look at the ascites, the type of ascites. Many things can be done with the simple ultrasound scan. And of course, somebody is writing fibroscan. That is something like, yeah, it is a type of ultrasound only with the, you give a pulsatile waves and you can see the resistance called as elastography, shear wave elastography. That can tell you what is the amount of resistance given by the liver tissue. Okay, we have a normogram saying that this much of tissue resistance with the liver is normal. If it is beyond that level, it is cirrhosis or very severely fibrosed or hard liver. So on, we can look at the fibroscan. But that is quite expensive. Not every center has got that. Of course, in this patient, the primary investigation will be, do you want to do a chest X-ray in this patient? You need to do a chest X-ray as well to find out the level of diaphragm, to find out the pleural effusion, all those things. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Then you need to do the ascitic paracentesis and analysis. Both
Yes,
all physical, biochemical, all those things you need to do. Endoscopy, upper GI endoscopy, yes, you need to do to find out whether there is a upper GI disease or varix or fundal varix, peptic ulcer disease. There is something called as congestive gastropathy. What happens? You know that the entire gastrointestinal system, upper GI system, gastrointestinal system is drained through the mesenteric vein, isn't it? That is a superior mesenteric vein is a part of portal venous system. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So when the portal hypertension is there, it gives pressure to the, it gives back pressure to the superior mesenteric vein as well. That means because of this superior mesenteric vein pressure is very high, the gastric mucosa. Now, where does this superior mesenteric vein drain from? Gastric and duodenum and upper intestinal mucosa. That mucosa also will be congested because of the portal hypertension. Okay.
Okay.
So The intestinal function, primary function of intestine is absorption. That does not happen. So that is why they develop decreased appetite. They develop nutritional deficiency in such patients with cirrhosis and portal hypertension. In addition to the cytokines, hypercatabolic state, which suppress the appetite as well. Okay, previous mechanism I have said, non-distensible abdomen. Now I am talking about portal congestive gastropathy. Okay, and enteropathy, portal congestive enteropathy, wherein mucosa is edematous. It cannot absorb things into the lumen, from the lumen. Okay,
Yes.
fine. So those are the things you can look in the upper GI endoscopy. Then of course the final, the gold standard test is liver biopsy. What needle is used for liver biopsy?
No, no, sir.
You can use, there are various things. There is something called as Mengele needle, which is a very least traumatic. Mengele needle, which is aspirated with the help of a syringe. Wim Silverman is a two-pronged. There is a long blade, two blades, which is inserted into the needle and then taken biopsy. That is a most traumatic form of liver biopsy. Then you do it with the true cut biopsy. Nowadays, everyone does it with the true cut biopsy with the one gun, one shot, it's quickly done. Okay. Mengele needle, true cut biopsy, Wim Silverman needle. Okay. Those are the ways. What is the contraindication of liver biopsy? Contraindication of liver biopsy? Of course, it's indicated, but contraindication, any person who has got very low platelet count, less than 60,000, relative contraindication. Any patient who has got prothrombin time more than 2 times its normal, okay, it is contraindicated because it can induce severe bleeding. Absolute contraindication. SCC is not contraindication. Bleeding, that is contraindication. Platelet count, low platelet count and low prolonged prothrombin time are the absolute contraindication. Or if you have a patient with fever, septic ascites, sepsis anywhere. Okay. Okay. Now, what are the, now I'll just briefly talk about, do we have time, Dr. Vijay? Dr. Balaji? Should we continue or we stop it here?
Continue, sir.
Okay, sir. Now, the ascitic fluid analysis, there are technique of the paracensis, all of you are aware. You should do under aseptic precaution. There are 2 ways to diagnose. Just to diagnose, you can do the ascitic tap or therapeutic also. In this patient, in your patient, I would like to do the paracentesis for the therapeutic purpose as well, because you've got such a large ascites with the umbilical hernia causing him breathlessness. So we need to do a therapeutic paracentesis. The ideal place to do the paracentesis is exactly opposite of the McBurney site. That is on the left lower quadrant of the abdomen, middle of the things. Okay. So then you can scrape like as if you're doing surgery, scrub properly under 100% aseptic precautions you need to do. Okay. And of course, the vessels are also less on that side. The chance of intestinal injury is also less on the left side. Then you need to use the Z technique. Because from the skin to the peritoneal cavity, there may be 2-3 layers. Once you pierce that, in a tense ascites, it can leak off when you take out the needle. So you should use a Z technique. At least 1 centimeter should be traversed in the subcutaneous tissue in a zigzag fashion to enter into the peritoneal cavity. Okay. Under aseptic precaution, you put a wide bore needle and allow fluid to drain in a simple tube like IV fluid. The common mistake what we do is in the IV fluid there is always a sponge tube, sponge filter will be there. You will have to remove that in aseptic precaution, otherwise it will not drain. You have to poke very frequently, very common mistake our residents do, and damage the cause the pain to the patient, discomfort to the patient. Okay, once you take first 50 ml, you should be kept aside for the all testings. You note it whether it is clear. If it is clear, most likely to be transudate, most likely, not 100%. Okay, transudate. Or is it cloudy? It may be usually purulent, cloudy, purulent in the peritonitis. It may be red as in hemorrhagic ascites due to various causes. It may be milky as in chylous ascites, or sometimes straw colored as in tubercular peritonitis. So the appearance of fluid will tell you that what could be the nature of the ascites. Then the first thing you need to do is, of course, you need to do the cell count, cell type, all those things are important. But most important thing in ascitic fluid is serum albumin to the ascitic fluid albumin gradient. Normally, serum albumin is little higher than the ascitic fluid albumin, always, unless it is very exudative. Okay. Now, what is the difference between these two things? You estimate the serum albumin and ascitic fluid albumin. What is the gradient? You look for the gradient. What is the importance of that? If the serum albumin to ascitic albumin gradient is more than 1.1 gram per deciliter, it indicates high gradient. It is called as high gradient ascites. That it is not differentiate. Satish Desai to everyone. It is not to differentiate exudative to transudative. It is to differentiate from the portal hypertensive ascites to the non-portal hypertensive ascites. Not only cirrhosis, there are so many conditions which can produce this high gradient. Okay. So it differentiates whether it is a portal. Now, what are the conditions which will produce portal hypertension? Common thing is cirrhosis. It can occur in even congestive heart failure. It can occur in chronic Budd-Chiari syndrome, portal vein thrombosis, veno-occlusive. All those things will produce portal hypertension. In all conditions of portal hypertension, it will produce high gradient ascites, SAG more than 1.1 gram per deciliter. Agreed? Then, if the SAG is less than 1.1 gram per deciliter, that is called as low gradient ascites. Low gradient ascites. That means gradient between the, or difference between the serum albumin to the ascitic albumin is less. There are two possibilities. Serum albumin is very low or ascitic albumin may be very high. Okay, there are two possibilities. Now this indicates it is not due to portal hypertension. I'll come back to the further things. The reasons for that are usually tubercular ascites, exudative, tubercular, peritoneal carcinomatosis, nephrotic syndrome, pancreatic ascites, and so on. Now, all of these are exudative ascites, but not nephrotic syndrome. See that mixture? Even in nephrotic syndrome, which is a transudative ascites, will give the low gradient. I'll come back to that a little later. Next slide. Now, what are the four things we have now in the ascitic fluid? What are the four things? We have ascitic fluid analysis. You have high SAG and low SAG on one side. High protein. Now, I'm not talking about serum protein. I'm talking about after the SAG estimation, you need to do the protein analysis in the ascitic fluid. I'll tell you the easiest way. Now, ascitic fluid more than 3 grams, ascitic fluid protein more than 3 grams indicates high protein ascites. Previously, we talked about high gradient, low gradient. Now we are talking about high protein ascites and ascitic protein less than 3 grams. That is known to differentiate transudative and exudative. Agreed? Now, do you think that cirrhotic ascites is a low gradient, a low protein ascites? Yes, cirrhotic ascites always low protein ascites. And the gradient, because there is portal hypertension, the gradient is high. So that becomes the low protein and high SAG, high gradient. Low protein, high SAG. That is only one condition, that is cirrhosis. Okay, fine. Now, we have one more condition, high protein, because patient does not have hypoalbuminemia. When it leaks the protein as well, and SAG is high. It may be due to the cardiac ascites. I have told you why ascitic fluid protein is high in the cardiac, Budd-Chiari and myxedema. Myxedema is mucopolysaccharide deposit. Cardiac ascites and Budd-Chiari because of the leak of the high protein fluid from the pores of the space, the sinusoidal space. Okay, that is what is leaking. High protein content is leaking, but they all will have low albumin. Now, you have one more condition, whereas there is the high protein, ascitic fluid protein is high and low gradient. SAG is very low. Two conditions, tubercular peritonitis, tubercular ascites, and peritoneal carcinomatosis. These are the very classical things. Okay. Now, you have one more condition, Under low grade, protein is also low. We know that nephrotic syndrome is everywhere protein is low. So they will have the low gradient, low protein. So this, if you adopt this thing, it is very easy to diagnose what could be the cause for the. In addition to these things, you can do the amylase. If the amylase is very high, it indicates pancreatic ascites. But your SAG will not help there, or protein will not help there. Amylase is very high in anything, it indicative of pancreatitis, pancreatic ascites, or rupture of the intestine, rupture of the hollow viscous somewhere. Everything can produce high amylase. Then, if the triglyceride is high, triglyceride is very high, chylous ascites, thoracic duct is obstructed. Okay, so on. So, and so you need to do such tests, simple tests to find out what could be the reason for the to find out the cause of ascites. Then, do you want to do any culture on these things? I think last class we have discussed. You have to do the gram staining to find out what is the gram positive, gram negative, bacilli, cocci, to differentiate whether there are multiple organisms. If it is multiple organism, it may be rupture of the hollow viscous intestine, or it may be your traumatic puncture. Not aseptic, septic precaution. You have taken all septic precaution to produce the paracentesis that can induce peritonitis. Multiple organisms may be seen by the gram stain. And you grow in the culture, there may be development of this no growth, monomicrobial or polymicrobial. So depending upon that. And cell type, cell counts and all things, you need to look for the lymphocytic predominant or polymorphonuclear predominant. Monomicrobial with polymorphonuclear leukocytosis, indicative of spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. Monomicrobial. Polymorphonuclear leukocytosis, more than 250, or total count is more than 500, SBP. If it is polymicrobial and polymorphonuclear leukocytosis, it indicates septic ascites. If it is tubercular ascites, there will be predominant lymphocytic predominance. So on, various tests are available to differentiate all these causes for the ascites. Okay. Yes, Prajna?
Treatment. Beta blockers are given.
Which beta blocker would you like to give?
Non-selective beta blockers like propranolol.
Now the current trend is to use metoprolol. Propranolol is of course standard drug. Metoprolol and even isosorbate dinitrate are used to reduce the portal venous pressure. Those are primarily used to reduce the portal venous pressure, thereby primary prevention of upper GI bleed. The moment you use the portal venous pressure lowering drug, you are obviously preventing the
upper GI
bleed, that is variceal bleed. Then what is the dose of beta blocker? Varies. 40 to 120 milligrams of propranolol can be used, or 25 to 100 milligrams of metoprolol can be used. Usually 25 to 50 milligrams of metoprolol can be used in divided doses. Okay. What about diuretics?
Diuretics like spironolactone in divided doses.
Okay. Now again, there are two schools of thought. Spironolactone is the first drug to be started. If you are very sure that patient is not responding, or very severe tense ascites, you can start the combination of the
spironolactone and furosemide.
As well as the furosemide combination. The maximum you should start with the medium to moderate dose, about 20 to 40 milligrams of furosemide with the 50 to 100 milligrams of spironolactone, and escalate. If you're starting spironolactone alone, you can start at the 25 milligrams thrice daily and escalate every alternate days. So the goal is to reduce the body weight by about 500 grams every alternate day without any significant ascites or leg edema, both things together. The patient very severe, you need to anticipate loss of about 500 grams per day. Okay. But you should be extra cautious on the electrolyte abnormality. Patient is always sick patient. If you use loop diuretic, that will produce natriuresis. So they can lose the sodium loss, potassium loss. They can precipitate hepatic encephalopathy. You should be extra cautious before using loop diuretics. But now it is a very common fashion to start with a high dose loop diuretics with the potassium sparing or spironolactone